Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Views on VUE. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being the mime, but I'm still your host. I'm flying solo today on the panel, and with me, I have a very special returning guest, one of our faves, Debbie O'Brien. How you doing, Deb?
Woohoo! One of your faves. I love it.
Woohoo! Yes, returning guest. Now, the interesting thing about Debbie is that every time she comes back, she's doing something different.
I have another job. I know.
She has a new job. So
this is the last time you're ever going to get me.
All right. Note that down. This is the last time that she's changing jobs, is what she's saying, basically. So, no, the first time we talked to you, I think it was me and Lindsay, and you were with Nuxt. You were working for the Nuxt organization.
That's correct.
And then the next time you had just changed, and I'm sorry, I forget where you were, but you were doing React.
Yeah, it's called a company got bit in Israel.
Right. You were doing React, and now you're with Microsoft.
Yeah.
So going for the small, personalized companies. Exactly.
But still open source, and I think that's the cool thing. I've gone from open source to open source to open source.
Yes, that is indeed most excellent. Trip down the open source lane that Microsoft has gone. So yeah, we can get into that for sure. Before we get into that, for people that have not heard the previous episodes or who could possibly live in the VUE world and not ever heard your name, why don't you give us a little background and who you are, what you do, why you're famous, and so on.
Famous? I didn't know I was famous. So yeah, my name is Debbie O'Brien, and basically I started out in open source many years back while I was working as a team lead in a company. Started off by contributing to Webpack. Actually, it started off by contributing to documentation, and it's really important that you can start in open source from just the smallest, tiniest things and end up like doing amazing things. So don't ever think you can't. And yeah, I live in Mallorca. It's a beautiful island off Spain. So I cycle and run around the island and do a lot of sport. You've probably seen that on Twitter. And I've been working in front end for many, many years, in and out of jobs. I always find it difficult because I live on a small island. So yeah, finding companies to have long full-time jobs in tech was very difficult. I think COVID has been great because it's really opened the whole world that you can now jump. I can now work for Microsoft, whereas before COVID times that possibly it wasn't going to be possible, right? There's no Microsoft offices here. And yeah, what do? I have a website called debbie.codes, and I throw up on there all these kind of stuff like the podcast interviews, blog posts, anything that I can do in my free time to help people out so that they can change their lives and get an amazing job in coding. Anything I can do to help is there. And my website's open source. It's built with Nuxt 3, upgraded to Nuxt 3. But yeah, basically that's probably why I'm famous, because I'm just like always helping people. And then I just got recognition for that, and that helped a lot. But yeah, anything I can do to help people in coding is my goal, my dream.
So for those of you listening to Debbie, that is not a Mallorcan accent that you're hearing. That is, yes, an Irish accent, just in case you might be confused. She's not a native Mallorcan or Spaniard. So
no, it's too cold in Ireland. It rains too much, so I moved over to the sun.
Oh, sounds like me here in Oregon, let me tell you. But anyway, so first, tell us before we get into the topic, and before I forget, I always forget the studio audience. How you doing, studio?
Wow, I do have a lot of fans.
Yes. We don't, well, the ticket sales went through the roof when people heard that you were coming. It's the demand. I almost swamped Ticketmaster servers. So before we get into what we're going to talk about, why don't you tell us about Microsoft, and for those who haven't heard of Microsoft, what it is you're doing there, especially since it is in the open source world.
Yeah, so it's funny because Microsoft was a goal of mine from like 4 years ago. And it was like my 5-year goal. So I had been kind of building up to eventually be good enough to get a job at Microsoft. So that was what I was doing 4 years ago when I started working for the companies I was working for. And that's why I was changing jobs. And at every job interview, I would turn around. They would say, like, where are you going to be in 3 years? And I would say, I'm going to be in Microsoft. And they would just look at me and say, like, yeah, you're just a little girl that's coming in here for a job in a small island in New York. It's never going to happen. But I actually didn't think it was going to happen either. So I kind of agreed with them. But But yeah, it's amazing, like, to go back to those managers and say, look where I am, and they're like so proud of me. So that's really cool. But yeah, I joined the Microsoft team in May, basically to work on Playwright. And to be honest, and I'm going to be very honest, I did not come from a massive testing background. I'm a front-end developer. I have been trying to get front-end developers into testing. Obviously, I've used Cypress and, Selenium and stuff, but not to a massive degree, right? Because every time we tried to put testing into a project, the managers or the bosses or the clients would turn around and say, we need to cut costs. Let's just remove testing. Let's just not test. And then be like Debbie fighting for testing and them saying, not going to happen. So yeah, when I joined Microsoft, it was kind of like, I didn't even think I was going to get the job. I was like, I'm not a testing expert. Oh my God. And there's this new tool, Playwright, that I do not know enough about. And now I'm like learning it like 24 hours a day to try and, pass the interview and to take on this responsibility. So it's been a wild, like crazy 7 months. To get the job was like insane. I was like, oh my God, I made it. I made my dream come true. I get to work in open source. Playwright is open source, and that's something I'm very passionate about. And I get to do testing, which is I really, really do enjoy, even though I'm not an expert, but I will be. So yeah, it's been incredible. And I think Microsoft is an incredible company to work for, especially because the amount of open source work that we're doing, the tools that we're creating for people, it's an incredible company.
So yeah, so open source at Microsoft to me has always been sort of an interesting topic, just because, I first started using Microsoft, and this will age me, back, Windows 3.1,
Wow.
Early Office days when I first got into my first software tech support job. We were supporting clients on Windows 3.1, and I did more memory management than anything else in those days, upper memory and lower memory, and gives me the heebie-jeebies. But back then, Microsoft was very anti-open source. I think one of the legends is it was either Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer was like, compared open source to the devil or something like that. And the biggest change over the years was when Steve Ballmer left, to be honest, because he hated open source. I think Bill Gates did too. But once he left, things opened up, and you started seeing stuff like the Linux kernel being incorporated into Windows, and the use of open source JavaScript libraries and other tools at Microsoft, maybe like on Azure, and now Microsoft owns GitHub, which is what the largest repository of open source code anywhere, and that probably makes some people nervous. And they make Visual Studio Code, which is probably one of the biggest, most popular IDEs used for open source projects. So yeah, it's been...
and don't forget TypeScript.
TypeScript, yes. What is TypeScript? I've never heard of it. I'm kidding. I kid. So yeah, they have definitely contributed a lot to the open source world for sure. So it's been quite an interesting evolution, for lack of a better term, in terms of Microsoft and embracing open source technologies. And you still have your proprietary stuff.
You need to change with it, right? And they made the right choice in changing and going down the open source world, because we can gain so much from it, and they're gaining from it, and giving back is basically, we're giving something back, but we're also gaining a lot as well. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, to be sure, there's still, the closed source stuff, Microsoft Office and all that, and Windows, and a lot of that is still closed source, of course. But I remember one of the things that I noticed, Microsoft, you'd mentioned Microsoft contributing back, when Explorer went to Chromium and got rid of their own engine and went to Chromium. I remember seeing, I think it was on Twitter, or Hacker News, I don't remember. But anyway, there had been a long-standing bug in Chromium. And within a very short time of Microsoft incorporating it, it had been fixed by a Microsoft engineer. And this had been like a bug that I guess had been around forever. So stuff like that, Microsoft contributing back to the web was certainly a welcome.
Everyone wins.
Happening, for lack of a better term, my brain freezing. So with that, let's talk about why we're here, and it's called Playwright. So Playwright is a testing, front-end testing, end-to-end testing, I think would be the term, tool for incorporating into one of your web projects. I think we talked about earlier, and from what I've heard, it's sort of a direct competitor to Cypress, which is another front-end testing tool. As I've mentioned before here in other episodes, I use Dusk just because that's part of Laravel, and where I work, we're a big Laravel shop with VUE on the front end, and so we use Dusk, and that has its advantages for Laravel developers in that you write the actual front-end test in PHP, and then I think it uses jQuery under the hood. But anyway, we want to talk about Playwright and what it is, how it works, why it's so awesome, and so on. So fire away, Deb. Tell us about Playwright.
Oh my God, where do I start? So yeah, let me just first go into automation testing first. So there are still companies out there, there's still people out there who, and I used to be that person in one of those jobs, who sits there on a Friday and tests the application by literally clicking buttons and being the user and using the website, right? You push it to production, then you test it. And that's still happening, right? There should not be someone sitting at a computer pressing those buttons. So automated testing is basically, we're going to automate that process by getting the computer basically to do all that, because a computer is faster than us. They can type faster, click faster, everything. So imagine filling out one of these really long forms, right, to do whatever. You fill out that form once, you write the test for that, and then every time you make a change to your code, that test is run against that form. It fills in that form, makes sure everything is okay, everything is validated. And this is like, I was doing a visa application the other day to go on a cruise, and I could not even fill out the form because it wouldn't let me. Stupid little things. And I was like going so mad. And I was saying to my husband, they don't use Playwright, they don't do testing. And he gets it. He's like, oh, this is so frustrating. So yeah, it's really important to test, especially like forms, logins, all those things, anything to do with money, that you're not going to lose clients, etc. So what Playwright does is basically has that test done for you, so it can rerun that test every time that you make a commit or a pull request. Now, when it comes to testing, and this is what I love about Playwright, is because a lot of people, and I know because I have literally sat there with a team of people trying to make them write tests, and I said to the developers, come on, you're gonna love this, trust me. And they're like, oh, do I have to? And it's like, it's been so hard. So trying to make testing easy, fun, a way for developers to be able to just incorporate it into their day-to-day jobs so that we have better code. And that's something I love about Playwright, is because we have a test generator. So literally you can go to that form and you can be that user once and you can fill in everything that you need to fill in, and it's going to generate that whole test for you. Now you have that whole test done, your job is done. You just click buttons for 30 seconds and you have a test written, and that's going to be run against every PR, and that's it. Now obviously you need to improve tests a little bit, add some assertions that the generator is not going to generate for you, but in general you can get up and running very, very quickly with Playwright and have those tests written. Even my mother can write tests. That's how easy it is. My mother is not a developer.
Okay, yeah, I thought we should clarify that for a minute. So let's, I guess, talk basics. What are we writing tests in?
So that's your choice, right? Now I'm a JavaScript or TypeScript developer, so I'm going to write my tests in the language that I'm comfortable with. But you could be a Java developer, or you could be a C# developer, or you could be a Python developer, and you can write it in that code that makes you happier, right? Basically. So everyone should write the test in the code that makes them happier, that they understand. It's using the same library, so Playwright is basically multi-language, and even the generator, I could even write code in Java without knowing Java, right? Very easily, because it will just generate it in Java for me. And it's very understandable between the languages. So if you have multiple teams, with using different languages across your company, it's very easy for me to say, I'm going to use TypeScript because I know that, but you're C#. You stick with that and you write it in that. I can still read their test and understand it. They can still read my test because we're using the same API.
Okay, so does that mean Playwright has different adapters or converters or compilers, I guess, for the different languages? so that you have to install that says, okay, I'm going to write in PHP, Java, whatever, and then it
So
translates everything for you.
Yeah, when you install it, you're going to choose which you're going to install, right? Whether you're going to install it on Node, you're going to install the C#, and therefore you're going to get the library based on what you installed, right? Based on like the test runner with Node is going to have everything in it, and for C# you've got to add your own test runner, like NUnit, for example, MS Test, another one.
Okay. So you've installed it, and you've said, okay, I'm going to write them in Node. Just to use a popular one. So for this test generator, and I'm reading through the docs here, you basically get it running, and then you go navigate it looks like you navigate through your forms or your window, whatever, and behind the scenes, it's sort of tracking what you're doing and generating the tests that do what you want. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's going to generate on every click event, or type event field. So whatever you're doing as in user interaction, could be clicking to go to a new page, for example, checking the menu works. So that's going to then be recorded. And now here's the cool thing. You could be doing it, from the CLI by running a command, and then you just copy that code and put it in your editor of choice. Or you can use the VS Code extension, and therefore, like right from VS Code, you're just going to click a button, it's going to open a browser, you click around, and it's going to already create a file for you in VS Code with all that test in there. So you don't even have to do anything. You just press save at the end. That's it, done. Happy days, which is kind of cool.
Okay, but so I can see how that would track what you're doing, but it would seem that you're going to have to tweak it with assertions, right? Because I'm looking, something I run into, or that we do when writing front-end tests a lot is, okay, I want to make sure maybe this text is here, or this element is on the page, or sometimes this element is not on the page, because you've deleted something, or you've searched and something went away or something like that, right? So I'm going to guess the generator can't really write assertions for what you're looking for to identify that, yes, it was successful or not, and you're going to have to fill those in. Is that correct?
Exactly. So at the moment, I would love it to happen, and maybe it will, but at the moment we don't generate assertions. But you can say click on, let's give us a very simple example, a header. You can click on that header, which is not a click, but once you click on it, it's going to generate that one, and then you could modify it. It's going to have that get by role heading, and then name equals whatever is the heading name. And then you can just remove the click event and turn it into an assertion and say expect to be visible. So it's really easy to refactor it. But also, if you really like, writing everything from scratch, you could just start writing it, and you could use the pick locator, because maybe you're thinking, how am I going to locate that heading? And I'm using heading as a simple example, right? You could say, do I use get by text? Do I use get by role? What role is a heading? So you can basically just use pick locator, hover over what it is, and then click it. Once you click it, it's going to actually save it then into this pick locator box in VS Code, or in the little box if you're using the CLI. And then you can just put that into your code. So you don't have to start inspecting the DOM to try and find a locator, right? You don't have to spend all the time doing it, because the generator is going to help you writing your tests, even writing your assertions, by using the pick locator.
Okay. So as I'm going through and writing my tests, or let's say I've written one from scratch, or say I've even taken one that's been generated and I'm tweaking it. So I can run it from a command line, is that right? Or this VS Code extension, click on something to run a test and see what happens.
You can click a little green triangle in VS Code to run the tests, and then it'll just run it right there. So you can run in headless mode where you don't see anything. It's just going to run it really quickly, press a green tick, and it's happy days done. Or you can click a button called show browser, and it's going to pop up the browser, and you can actually visually see it doing its stuff, and then kind of say, yeah, that looks good, even though it was really fast. But yeah, you could slow it down if you want to. But also you can open it up on different browsers. So you can kind of say, I want to see this on WebKit, because I specifically know it's going to cause a problem on this, and I want to actually visually see it working on WebKit. So you can basically, visually see it on any of the browsers you want.
Excellent. Okay. So yeah, for me, I always do it by default. headless, or excuse me, not headless. I turn it off. I want to see the browser.
Yeah, me too.
Because what I've experienced from a code standpoint is in your terminal, say, okay, it failed at such and such a line in this particular test. But I'm like, okay, why? You know, one of the things that we do with our testing, and I'm curious to see how Playwright does this, and this might be more of a deployment environment thing, is, you know, we have it set up so anytime we deploy code to a particular branch, it runs through our whole test suite we're using Circle CI.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Circle CI provides for you is logs and then like artifacts. So, you know, this is a picture of what's going on at your screen when this error happened. And what I've noticed sometimes is that, you know, if you look at the log and you see where it failed, is like something was unavailable. You know, you couldn't click on this particular button like you wanted to because it wasn't clickable for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that can be any number of things. You know, maybe you've got a condition that it's disabled until such and such field is filled in. But the one that I've seen that's helped me out quite a bit is because there's some error message in front of your element that makes it not able to be clicked on because something else is wrong. It could be a return code from your back end, you know, 404 or something like that, and that's blocking it. And so is that something that Playwright does, you know, saves artifacts and stuff, or is that more of a deployment environment type of setting?
Yeah, no, so you can do the whole, like, you know, video screenshot is what, you know, a lot of people look for. But we also have something called a trace viewer, which is even better. So the trace viewer gives you a whole trace of your test. And it's kind of like, it saves like it's a PWA. So you can launch it as a PWA and actually then visually go through it. And there's a timeline at the very, very top. Think of the timeline as in like the Chrome browser DevTools timeline. And you can kind of like hover over it, and it's going to give you a visual screenshot of the state of the page on every one of those events that happened. So you kind of hover over it in your own time, see what happens. And then down the bottom, you have on one side all these kind of like, you know, what was happening. So every single step of the test. In the middle, you have the DOM snapshot, which is not an image snapshot, a DOM snapshot, which means you can inspect it and open the Chrome DevTools right there in that snapshot of the test. And you can have the before and after, so you can see what Playwright was clicking, what happened before, what happened after, so you can really try and understand what Playwright was trying to do and what was, say, covering up that button that you couldn't click, for example. And it also shows, like, you know, if there was other consoles, so any console errors, any network requests that failed, and the test code is there as well. So say you wanted to send that to a developer, you know, that didn't write that test, but you wanted their opinion on it. The code is right there. They can kind of see, hey, but on line, you know, 15, you've got this problem, that's what's causing it. Or you can actually just go through the logs and, you know, Playwright will say, hey, look, I tried to do this, but it's out of viewport. And then because you've got Chrome DevTools, you can open up that Chrome DevTools and you can like hover over it and you can see like, oh, wow, look, it's completely out of viewport. Say like a mobile menu, and the mobile menu's out of viewport and Playwright couldn't click it because it's not there. And then you can really understand what's going on. So the trace viewer is something that is set up on CI and runs on first retry by default. But it's something that you can do locally if you want by just putting a little flag after your test, -- trace on, and then it's going to actually create that trace locally. And then you can locally kind of go through it, which is really good for local debugging.
Yes. Yes, I'm all about local debugging. So just to clarify, again, I'm looking at the doc pages on the trace viewer stuff. This is all stuff that you get on your local, right? The screenshots and the DOM snapshots and all of that.
Yeah. So you can do -- trace on, and even if your test passes, it doesn't have to fail now because you're doing it locally. You can always also set it on CI to have a trace for every single test, right? But that would be terrible because then you're like using space, right? But locally, just do -- trace on, and then like obviously you don't need to do it all the time because you don't need to always understand what your test is doing. But when you have a problem, when you have something you can't figure out, when your test is failing, you're like, why is this failing? Just run it with -- trace on, and then just go through it and see what Playwright is doing. And then you can kind of like understand it a lot better, especially if you like, you know what the DOM was meant to do, and you can go into the CSS and see if something was hidden. If I found a couple of times actually where they had a CSS hidden class, and they were like hiding it on mobile, and that's why the test failed. And I was like, why is this failing? It's like, display none. Look at that. I found you.
So let's going through the docs here again. So let's talk about parameterized tests. What is that?
I would have to look it up myself. I don't know. What are you asking me?
The expert. Okay, so it's multiple test projects at the same time. One and two projects with different options. Okay. So it looks like you're passing in. Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So you can run a test and basically dynamically pass in different pieces of data that are needed by the test, so that you can run the same test just from different environments, and not have to have two whole separate suites of tests, because this is different and this is different only because of data.
Yes, correct.
You learned something new today.
Many. Yeah, I haven't done that actually. This is the one with Bob and Alice, right, in the docs, and they have a great example, but I've never had the need to do it yet. But yeah, there's so many things you can do, which is like makes it very cool. But yeah, if you've gone through the docs, like we have, so much from accessibility testing, visual regression testing, mock APIs. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, the mock APIs are basically a way to generate an API for data that you need during your test, instead of having to hit a real API endpoint, which you probably don't want to do, like hit production. I'm running tests, I'm going to take down my production because I'm hitting all these APIs, right?
Yeah, I used to do that. I didn't know do you know what I mean? You just like testing it out. Yes, it works. And you're like, actually, no, that's not what you should be testing.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the thing about tests and computers in general. They do what you tell them to do, not what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Right? So you got this great test written and it comes back, but it's really not what you needed to test. So there's only so much an automated test generator can do, right? It can't really
exactly, because
read your mind and know what you need to test, what you really, really need to test.
If you generate your tests and say you go to your social networks to test that, it goes to Twitter, for example, that's what the test is going to write for you, and it's going to generate for you. But that's not good, because now we're hitting Twitter, and, it might not even work, because there might be some sort of sign-in modal that comes up, and now you're going to have this problem of checking if Twitter is that really my Twitter account, etc. But yeah, you can intercept routes and stuff. And that's something I only learned recently, which is really, really cool. So you can intercept that route, and before it goes to Twitter server, it's going to I say, give me a mock Twitter page, which just says Debbie's Twitter. And then it tests that and it comes back. So what it's really testing is that the link is actually clickable, that it's able to find it, and it's going to go to that place. But we're not going to test that the server gave back Debbie on Twitter, because that's up to Twitter to do that, right?
Right. So one of the things you had mentioned was the ability to test across browsers and other environments. And in the emulation section, I find this interesting, is that you can also emulate real devices like a mobile phone or a tablet. So you have to tell it, okay, I want to test on this and this and this, and it simulates one of those types of browsers, instead of just always assuming it's on a desktop, because the vast majority of people are looking at web pages on a desktop, right?
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, the same as well. My test doesn't work on mobile Safari, and it's why does it not work on mobile Safari? And there's little things but you go to mobile hamburger menus, the user's got to click that. That's an extra click that you didn't write in your test. And I asked this question a couple of times on stage, and I said, what do we do in this situation? And a lot of people went, we just write two tests. And I'm like, what? You're going to write two tests? One test for desktop and one test for mobile? Seriously? Just because you have to click an extra button? But they couldn't figure out how to do it. If not, what do you do? And I was the same. I was like, how do I do this? Can I not just if it's mobile, just click that button? And that's exactly what you can do. You can just put if is mobile, and then locate hamburger menu, get by role button menu, click, and then close that if is mobile, and then continue your test. And that's kind of like really cool because like that's what the user would do. They would have to click that mobile menu button and maybe close it if they didn't want to click anything, whatever. But the fact that you can write one test and actually just say, you know what, if you're mobile, go this. And then you can test it not just on Safari, you can test it on any, mobile device that you want to test it on.
Yeah, that's really strange, though, that you would have an error on Safari that's not on any other browser. That would never happen. Right, for sure. What else can we do with Playwright that we haven't talked about, or any other features that you can think of that make it so better, shall we say, than the competitors?
I mean, Playwright is super fast. I think that's one of the things a lot of people just, the wow factor for them is like how fast your tests run. And it's really important because everybody's busy. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm making a pull request and it's going to run the test. I'm going to go have a coffee, have a sandwich, come back, and maybe they'll have finished, right? You want to be able to have things done fast.
Right.
Tests run in parallel, like just for free out of the box, just automatically. So, everything is running in parallel, which makes it just like super fast. And then like you can do extra stuff, right? You can add more workers, you can do sharding, you do all that kind of stuff and have them, even faster than that. But yeah, it's super fast. I think that's really, really important. Another couple of things is that you can test across multiple domains. This is really handy if you are using a chat application, for example, and you wanted to test, like that I'm chatting to that other browser window and that's kind of chatting back to me, and I can test that whole integration that everything works. You don't have to do anything. It just works. So it's just like, a lot of the stuff about Playwright is it just works. You just do it. Iframes, it just works. You just test an iframe. Just use the pick locator and it'll just find that iframe for you and give you that. But it's just like iframe, like frame locator instead of page, right? So yeah, there's a lot of cool things that we've solved the problem that people have had previously, where people were struggling, and one of the things is that Playwright solved that problem. So that's kind of very cool.
It's in there. There was an old commercial for like it was a food, and the tagline was, does it have this? It's in there.
Yeah.
Or can it do this? It's in there. I think it was like a spaghetti sauce or something. I forget what it was. But that's what it sort of reminds me of.
Yeah. And TypeScript by default, like TypeScript first, because obviously Microsoft. But it's just that's where everyone's going, right? Everyone is, starting to work with TypeScript. But one of the things I love about the fact that you can write your tests in TypeScript, you don't even have to know any TypeScript. You just have to put a TS extension on your test file, and you can test your JavaScript code, right? Because you're testing what's in the browser, really. But you don't have to actually write TypeScript. You're just writing your tests in TypeScript. What you get is better integration in your IDE, for example. It's gonna tell you what's available to you, and it's gonna underline any mistakes you have. So it makes the experience a lot better. And I think when people are choosing, they see TypeScript and they go, oh my God, TypeScript. And then they just go, I'll go with JavaScript. And it's like, no, actually install the TypeScript because, it's just compiling. That's all it's, you don't need to do anything extra to get all the benefits. And that's what's really important.
And just to clarify, VS Code, obviously, because Microsoft owns VS Code and Playwright and TypeScript, all this, it's going to be pretty tightly integrated. But that's not to say you couldn't use another IDE or tool for writing your tests and getting, a lot of those benefits. Like in my shop, we use PHP Storm just because we write a lot of PHP, and it really works for us in our setup. So, TypeScript is TypeScript, right? So you're going to...
Yes. You're going to get it in any of the editors, yes.
Yeah, the code hinting and tests. And those, we rely on those quite a bit. So that's nice to have for sure. So looking at, I mentioned we use Circle CI, and you've got Travis CI. There's GitHub Actions. Obviously, there's some
integration with GitHub.
GitHub Actions. It's really odd. Right. So it creates your YAML file, and will pull your branches and run this and that, and that's awesome. And then there's also a setting for continuous integration for other packages.
Yeah.
As well as GitHub Actions, Docker, Azure Pipeline. Azure. Oh, that's Microsoft too. Yes. And you even have a section on Circle CI. in the
Yeah.
platform that we run. So yeah, it looks like you have even Jenkins, going back to Jenkins, Bitbucket,
Yeah.
and so on. So yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah,
pre-built stuff that makes it easy to integrate.
I think that's kind of important to point out, because like we're talking about a lot of integrations and, we work with all the Microsoft products, etc. But you don't have to. You can totally like use whatever you want. Playwright is open source. It's free. So you can go and use it on any other editor. You can go and use, Circle CI or whatever that you want to use. The only thing is that like, you can't tell a company, oh, change and move to GitHub because we think GitHub is better because, we are Microsoft and we have a better integration. No, your company has already got their system set up. They're going to use that. So that's totally cool. But if anyone is starting out, the GitHub integration is just incredible. And especially if you're using the VS Code extension, because when you install, it's just literally tick the box to say like, do you want to GitHub Actions? You just tick it. And now this is all created for you. So when you create your repository in GitHub and just push your code, that's it. It's all done. Your tests are now going to run every pull request. And you don't have to do anything. It just works. It's like writing the docs for this page. It just works. Just tick the box and then it works.
Now, looking at the supported language pages we had talked about, I don't think we can do it anything unless I'm reading this correctly, because the options listed on here are JavaScript and TypeScript, Python, Java, and .NET.
Correct.
Is there any work to add other languages, say PHP, which is a sort of popular web development platform?
Not that I'm aware of, but you could submit a question on GitHub and ask the engineers that. We do a lot of work with the GitHub issues. So if you had like that, request or that question, you could submit it there and they would answer as to if that's going to happen, if it's not, why not, etc. But as far as I know, it's not on the roadmap, but I don't know if it's because of a demand issue or if it's just like because it's more, I don't know, back end, you're not testing much in the front end. You could just we just kind of assume all the PHP people know JavaScript and TypeScript. That's what I would assume.
But you know the dangers of assuming, right?
You all know Vue, right? You all,
Yes.
Taylor
Yes.
did it all, you all know Vue now.
Well, like I said, for instance, somebody coming from Dusk, all of the Dust tests, even though they're front end tests, are written in PHP. So that would, granted, yeah, you could say we use JavaScript because that's what we're using on the front end. But I just thought it'd be worth asking. Yeah, maybe I'll go in and add a question about there to see what the plans are. Because like I said, PHP is, if you look in terms of what backend languages are used on the web, it's pretty dominant between, Drupal and WordPress and Joomla and Craft and a lot of the CMSs that are out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it would be one worth at least looking at, for sure. Well, I think we've made our way through all the documents. Anything else we missing talking about Playwright?
Yeah, we covered all browsers. Auto weighting, auto weighting and assertions. So, like one of the great things about the assertions we have is that they will auto weight, and what that means is it's gonna like wait for your DOM to be loaded for that. Say we're gonna use a button here, for example. Wait for that button to be clickable. And then when it is, then Playwright is going to perform that action. So you don't have to start writing timeouts or kind of thinking like, how long is it going to take for that to be ready? And there's an animation to go first. Playwright will just wait. It'll just do everything for you. So that's really, really cool to point out. And also test isolation. So by default, again, just works. All your tests are isolated. So whatever happens in one test, like whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, whatever happens in one test stays in that one test. And whatever happens in the other test, is going to get up. It's going to like say, let me kind of put it in a way that it's going to open up a new incognito browser window, right? That knows nothing about what happened in the other browser window. So if you clicked on a link, for example, that's not going to have that link clicked in that other test. So that kind of means you don't have to clean up. You don't have to do anything. Like you have basically everything running, new and fresh in an isolation. So yeah, Playwright just works like that. And then we have the locators. So we talked a little bit about how to locate, using the generator and stuff. And we recently improved our locators a lot by using testing library inspired locators. So if you've ever used, testing library, so things like get by role, get by test ID, if you want to use a test ID, for example, but we want to kind of go towards user-facing role. So what is the user seeing? The user seeing a button, they're seeing a link, they're seeing a heading. Well, you could use a get by role button, for example, or you could use a test ID, right? And now you've got the two differences. And a lot of people say, oh, we put the test ID everywhere, we'll change all our code and we'll add this in. But then what if somebody changes that button to a link, for example, right? Because the designer made it look different. Now your actually test is a little bit different, right? Whereas testing user, you're also testing now accessibility. You're making sure that button actually is a button, that it's not a link, or that link is actually a link and not a button. It might look like a button, right? So yeah, basically kind of focused towards the user-facing roles to improve accessibility testing. But obviously, we do have the test ID if you want to, if you need to. But basically, the get by role is our big improvement, and a lot of other locators in there as well. So we have a whole document on locators, which you've probably got now open.
I do.
So think about a form. You might want to get by say the label or the placeholder of that form element. You can also do get by text, right? Which is, maybe that text should never change. Like my name on my website, my name should never change. Someone should not make a PR to change my name. So that would be a good kind of way of get by text. But if that text is going to change, then obviously you might need something different, get by a list item for a load of product card items, etc. But yeah, they're all basically in there. I wrote a doc as well recently on how to choose locators and which locators and etc. So you can find that on my website.
So when we talk about
too.
Right. So when you say role, are those ARIA roles or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the implicit role that that a button has. A button is not just an area role; it's an implicit role of button, right? But then you could add an area role, and then it's going to have get by role, whatever that area role that you added. So you could turn a div into a button, right? And then now you could say get by role button because you wrote area role button, but you shouldn't use a div with an area role of button. You should just use a button, for example. But yes, it will respect the area labels, area roles as well.
So within your elements, is there a way to define labels or IDs that are specific only to testing that make it easier? So let me illustrate with one of the things that you can do in Dusk is that in your elements, you can define, you say Dusk equals whatever, whatever arbitrary identifier you want for that particular element. And the only place it matters is when you're running your Dusk tests. So when you're running through your test and you want to see is something present or is something missing or does it have the right value, you just put an @ in front of that that identifier that you created, my custom Dusk element, whatever. And that makes it very easy instead of having to use some complex CSS rule or to use some attribute that may or may not be there. So
exactly, which you shouldn't use, right? Because then that somebody could change that and they don't know that you've associated it with your test. Right.
It's brittle. Can you do that? Can you do that with Playwright where you can okay, when I'm testing, just identify this text field by this name and look for it?
Yeah. So we have a data-test ID, which is our predefined one. But you could totally change that in the configuration, and you could say Debbie's test ID, for example, Debbie's data test, whatever you want to put, right? And then you change that, and then you can basically locate based on that test ID. But yeah, basically the test ID is there, works the same as you would in other tests.
So that's using the native data attribute on the element then?
It's using the data test ID attribute that obviously you will put it on the code. You're gonna have to manually write in there that data attribute, right? Where you want to put it, and then you can test against that. And if someone sees test ID, they're not gonna data-test ID, for example. They're normally not gonna delete that because they know it has to do with a test.
Right. Okay. So locate by test ID. What do you know? It's in the docs. RTFM, baby. RTFM. So Okay, good. Yeah, because that's a real headache sometimes. That trying to identify something by some CSS selector
Like you,
or
yeah, like you,
text.
if you do not have access to the code, then if that's the only thing you have, then use a CSS selector. But in general, it's like just don't use CSS selectors, because your CSS is going to change. Someone
Right.
on the team is going to change. They come along and they're going to change from Bootstrap to Tailwind. Now, oh my God, now you're gone completely, right?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Or this is Vue. Maybe they go to Beautify. Who knows?
Yeah.
So alrighty. Well, that's awesome. I certainly have to pull this in and actually do testing, kicking and screaming. From doing it professionally all the time, every day, I've definitely seen the value of tests and how they've caught things that inadvertently changed, or one change here broke something way downstream. So on my more personal projects, I think I'm gonna have to start doing the same thing, much as I don't want to at times.
You do want to. This is the attitude. We're going to change this attitude. We want to test. We love testing, and testing is fun and easy and cool.
Yes, when it becomes easier, then you're more likely to do it, shall we say?
Well, it's like when I moved from Vue to React, right? And I was like, React was just hard and difficult. It's almost like I just want to write my Vue applications again, right? But now
Yes.
I'm like, now I know React. I actually really love React. And I think a lot of people say, I don't like this because they don't know how to do it. And if we can help people know how to do something, they're going to love it.
Just so you know, saying I love React on a Vue podcast is generally considered heresy, but we'll let it slide this time just because of who you are.
Sorry.
I kid people. Don't flame me on Twitter or anything. Okay. So, all right. So the site for Playwright is playwright.dev. Love
Correct.
those new top level domains you can get. The docs look pretty amazing, pretty detailed.
Thanks.
Everything that we've talked about is outlined in the documents here. So give it a try. And with that, we'll move on.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Before we move on.
I would just say start with the getting started, because I created it. No, because because I've built it in a way that in basically 5 minutes you should be able to have a test up and running and on CI. So that's the mission, and I think you can all do that.
Yes, yeah, it looks pretty straightforward and pretty easy, at least according to the docs. I'll give it a shot here soon, for sure. All right, now we will move on to picks. Picks are the part of the program, however you want to call it, where we get to talk about things that are not tech related, or maybe they are tech related. Just something that you find interesting. We've talked about food and books and tools and movies and toys and you name it. So I will go first. And as I always like to say, the high point of any of my episodes are the dad jokes of the week. Debbie's going, oh my gosh. So
I'm taking notes.
right. What not to do on a podcast, right? So first question. Think of all the Marvel movies or the superhero movies, Iron Man and so on. And this is one little known behind the scenes type of thing is, do you know why Iron Man and Aquaman never got along? They had rust issues.
Oh, God.
Right? So cow jokes, I got a couple of the cow jokes. I always appreciate expanding my cow jokes from the basic, what do you call a cow with no legs, ground beef type stuff, to what do you call a cow who's done amazing things in her life? Legendary.
That's kind of
Very.
cool. It's kind of cool, but almost a little bit offensive in a way, you know what I mean? So I could so
Dairy.
see my brothers using that.
And somebody pointed out to me the other day that cow farts are dairy air. Dairy air. Anyway, sorry. That was ruined when you got to explain them. And then finally, this is in honor of Drew Baker, who's been a guest host, wasn't able to make it today. The other day I was watching an Australian baking show. We get a lot of Australian baking shows up here in the States. And, meringue, like a lemon meringue pie is really difficult to make. It can fall flat and do whatever. So everybody cheered when one of the contestants successfully made meringue. But that surprised me because I always thought Australians usually boomerang. Yes, so anyway, those are the dad jokes of the week. Debbie, what do you got for us for a pick?
Okay, I've got 3.
3?
Yeah.
3
I'm gonna
picks.
Go with it. So the first one is the first one is like a shameless plug, actually. The first one is Discord. So we moved the Playwright community to Discord literally like less than 24 hours ago. So if you're not there, it's because you just haven't found out yet, because it's like hot news. So yeah, join us on Discord because it's like going to be fun in there. And we're going to do a lot of kind of cool and fun things with the community. We've got like hundreds of community members in there already. So it's really amazing. So yes, Discord, Playwright Discord. Second one, keeping with
How
the
do you find
Ps.
it? Is there, sorry, before you go on, how do you find it? Is there like a link from the docs page, or you just search for Playwright in Discord, or how does that work?
I thought you meant how do you find it, as in what do you think of it?
Oh,
yes. No. So yeah, we've basically put it everywhere, but I haven't put it on the docs, but I've kind of like sneakily redirected the Slack link to Discord. So if you see the word Slack, you'll just go to Discord.
In the documentation?
Yeah, at the very bottom in the footer.
Oh.
It's like our sneaky way in, right? But we're
there it is.
yeah, we're gonna like properly change it soon. We like it's so new, so that's why like we still haven't updated everything.
Okay, so Discord, number 1 pick.
Woohoo! Number 2, keeping with the P's, the pyramids. I was literally in Egypt less than 2 weeks ago, and I got to see the pyramids for the first time, and they are insanely impressive, and I highly recommend everyone go to Egypt and see the pyramids. If that should be on your to-do list, top priority, make it happen. There you go. If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat to see those. One of those things you read about and see in books and stuff all the time. But I'm gonna guess that pictures don't really do it justice as compared to actually being there, right?
Just the fact that it's still there after all those years, like they had amazing engineers who like literally built something that stood there for so long, and it's still as beautiful as when they built it. And I mean, they must have done testing, right? I'm sure of it.
I think for them it would be more hardware testing than software testing.
You never know. And the last pick is Wednesday. So I don't really do a lot of TV. I'm more of a sports person. So when I find something that I actually like, it's like I might as well kind of share it. And this is a little bit like almost like it's for kids. Kind of think it's like aimed at the kids more than anything. But Wednesday, the Addams Family kind of new Tim Burton Wednesday. It's actually really good. It's actually really funny. And the main character, I think she's amazing. I think she's got a great future ahead of herself. But yeah, I would sit down, watch Wednesday, book your trip to the pyramids, and then get on Discord and chat to us about Playwright.
Yes, I'm already in the room. So yes, it's their Playwright. It's got the little icon with the Shakespearean type of masks, a red and a green one. So
Yes.
Cool. And Wednesday, yes, I can remember watching some of the very original Addams Family. The black and white TV show from what was it, 50s and 60s, I think, and Gomez Addams and Little Wednesday. So yeah, I might have to pony up and watch this. I've heard good things about it. I mean, she's rather. Does she smile during the whole thing?
Ever? I think she smiled twice.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's her thing. Is sort
like
of
she really held it. Like it was it was really impressive. And the smile was like you needed it in that moment. But like she's played that character very, very well. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I've heard that the one character that really sort of steals the show is the hand.
Yeah, the hand is amazing. Like it's just brilliant how it's done. It's incredible. I think it's great.
Huh. Yeah, I'd have to check it out. Put the link to that in the show notes to at least some information about it.
Cool.
All righty. Well, thank you for coming yet again. That's a hat trick for you, Views on View. Talking all about Playwright. If people want to read what you have to say or give you money or whatever, what's the best places to do that?
Yeah, I love it. Give me money. You can buy me beers. There's a link on my website to buy me beers. Debbie.codes is my website. You can find everything there and all links to, my GitHub. Because we're on Views on View, my website is in Nux 3. I updated it recently and I have a whole blog post on my painful journey of all the pain I had to go through to get there so that you don't have to go through that pain. And also my website is open source. You can go to GitHub, clone it, make your own copy of it, do your own things, uses Nux content, write your own blog posts, of course, not, don't use mine, but yeah, use the whole, everything to kind of like be able to fetch that data and, create your own site. So if you're starting out and you want to have a website up and running, my website is your website. Go for it. Take it. It's open source. It's all yours.
Lots of open source goodies. All righty. With that, we will wrap up. I'd like to say thank you once again to the studio audience for coming today. They paid a premium price to be here, so.
And my website has tests, just so I want to see. I want to see everyone's websites have tests for next year. That's everyone's New Year's resolution.
Okay, so if you go to her site and find errors, then make sure and send her an email or ping her in the Playwright Discord and say, "Hey, did you write a test for this?" Exactly.
Or just make a PR to my website.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed hearing more about Playwright, and we will talk at you next time on Views on View.
Thank you very much. Bye.